When you're in your mid-20s, you really only have three options.
Get married,
Get a master's,
or run a marathon.
Hi, I'm Francis.
And I'm Brian.
And welcome to this week's episode of the Zone 2 podcast, where we explore all there is to learn about the world of running. This is your weekly reminder that if you like today's episode, be sure to leave us 5 stars either on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also find us on Instagram at the Zone 2 Podcast for more content and to stay up to date on future episodes. So, Brian, have you ever heard slay the day, rep the steps?
I have heard that, Francis.
If you're on running TikTok, you've probably seen his catchphrase, complete with a dab. He's Boston 48. Named for the 48 Boston marathons he's completed, and he's currently looking forward to completing his 49th. In this episode, we're looking beyond the recent running boom that's shaped most of our guests, and we're welcoming Mike Beeman, a man who has been running consistently for an incredible 56 years. What did people do before Strava? Were they running or just sitting around? We'll never truly know because, as we know, if it wasn't on Strava, it never happened, right? Please welcome the man himself, Mike Beeman. Mike, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. That's quite an intro. It's probably the best intro I've ever had, to be honest.
Really?
With you. That was pretty dynamic, but you're 100% right. You know, when I started running, we didn't have the Garmin, we didn't have Strava, we didn't have technology, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have those things you put in your ears. And by the way, I've never, ever, ever run with an ounce of music in my ears because that's how I was brought up. And you ran either training for high school cross country or college cross country, and then beyond that. And the music thing, I never ever used it and never will. It's just the way it is. So you go from, the archaic days to now, and it's amazing seeing everything. And I get a kick out of TikTok and watching people talk about stuff like they even, reinvented the wheel, but I don't shame anybody.
Mike, thanks so much for making time to come on the podcast. We're going to break down our weeks. We'll just talk about our weeks of training, and then we'll take a step back and I think kind of talk through where you're coming from and learn a little bit more about your experience there. But how was your week of training this week?
Well, I'm post Boston Marathon, and I call my running now at my age because I'm in my 70th year on the planet. I mean, I'm 69 plus. And so sustainable means I run, walk. So I've learned to run sometimes, some days I'll run straight, 4, 5, 6 miles. And like this morning I did 10, but it was a run walk. And it started out with just walking a mile, and I increased, 2 minutes running, 1 minute walk, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 3 minutes, 1 minute. And by the end, I'm doing a decent pace, but I'm involved with the high school cross country team here in Easley, South Carolina. So I volunteer with them 3 days a week. So tomorrow morning, I'll warm up a couple miles, and I'll do like 4 miles straight at maybe a low 10, and just kind of encourage the kids. I can't keep up with the fast kids, but I can certainly keep up with the not so fast kids, and just be an encourager. I've had my day in the sun. I average right now 40 to 50 miles a week. I'm retired, so I do a lot of gym work, like strength training, not so much bench press and curls, but bands and resistance and so on and so forth, hip flexors, all those things that I wish I had started when I was your age. It certainly pays dividends, for me. So I was able to run Boston this year, basically because I went to physical therapy. So I exercise a lot. So like I said, I was averaging about 50 to 60 miles a week before Boston, but that's because I would do that longer activity, to get used to being out there for 4 or 5 hours, for the Boston Marathon.
That's incredible, Mike. I think a topic that we've kind of been circling back to in recent episodes is the role that strength training plays in running training and preparing for races. And obviously, I mean, you've ran Boston 48 times, so Francis and I are both super interested in learning more about longevity and kind of how you've been able to keep coming back year after year. So we're looking forward to touching on that a little bit. Francis, how was your week this week?
My week was pretty good. I know that you were at Tuesday's Heartbreak Signature Speed at Steinbrenner Stadium. So every week on Tuesdays at 6:30 in the morning, they have Signature Speed at the MIT track. And they have a coach, Dan Fitzgerald from the Heartbreak Running Company, and he comes and he coaches everyone through a workout. And this was the first one of the season, so it was the first one back. Huge crowd. There's probably 40, 50 people there, and
More than that, there's probably 100
60,
people.
100 people. Yeah, it was a great group, and split us all into our pace groups. I maybe foolhardily chose to go into the fastest pace group, which I kind of regretted afterwards, because I definitely cooked my legs a little bit harder than I thought, and actually ended up with a slightly angry text from my coach afterwards, after he saw my Strava and was like, I thought you were going to do the workout that we had planned. And I was like, well, it's shorter, but it's faster, right? So it's comparable. And he's like, absolutely not. It's not comparable. And I was like, okay, cool. But I will be going back this week, but I'll be doing my own workout. Wednesday, heat exposure training. That's what I named it on my Strava run, because it was like 89 degrees probably. Super uncomfortable, but ran into some friends on the Esplanade down by the Charles. Thursday did a easy 8 miles. And then Friday I did Tracksmith Bagel Run, which is in Boston, the Tracksmith running store. They do a free bagels and coffee run every Friday at 6:30 in the morning, and 7.5 miles yesterday. And then today, Brian and I went on a 30-mile bike ride from MIT all the way up to Lexington and then back on the rail trail. So overall this week, if you count the biking, it came to around 65 miles. So pretty good week, but just happy that the weather's changed and happy that we had some good weather to actually go outside and enjoy, even though it was a little bit rainy on Saturday.
A little jealous about the rail trail, because I'm very aware of that, living in the Londonderry area. And, before you guys were born, that was a rail trail, but it wasn't paved. It was dirt. And so it was so uneven. It was because kids would ride their dirt bikes on it, and they would, make divots in it. So you were running and you would go from like here down to here and so on and so forth.
wow.
So I'm very aware of that rail trail. But in South Carolina, we have trails like that, but they're extremely hilly. Like when I was on today, it got me so ready for Boston, because it simulates Boston. It's up and down and up and down, and that's what I train on every day. So I'm very blessed to have that in my backyard. Literally, it's like I can walk outside the door and just go running. It's great.
Having access to a trail like that too makes such a difference. If you're
Yes.
able to just literally go out the door and run, I feel like if you don't have access to hills, it takes a lot more intention and effort to get out there and run them every day.
Yes, no cars, a lot of people, and the other day there was a bear, but it was moving across the trail, so no worries. I think it was a baby anyway, so it just was probably waking up and going places.
Going for a run on its own, probably.
Exactly.
You hope there's not a mama bear nearby.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so that was my week. Pretty good. Brian, how was your week?
I had a great week this week. I was happy to get out there with you a few times. Bagel run on Friday at Tracksmith and at Heartbreak Tuesday morning. Had a ton of fun, and of course, happy to get out for some cross training today on the bike. But this was my first week since Newport, really getting back into it. My first week officially being coached by Coach Dev. So we kind of have a little bit of a plan going to do some base building for 2 months before Philly training officially starts. So I had about a 40-mile week this week, but definitely the running highlight, I would say, was yesterday. We went out to the Battle Road Trail, ran out to Lexington and back on the Battle Road Trail, which is sort of a rail trail, but again, it's dirt. Like Mike was saying, it's not paved. So very interesting. I feel like doing tempo work on gravel as opposed to doing it on a paved road, and really hilly too. I think it was about 500 feet of elevation gain we did in just about 10 miles. So we were really working it, but that's good hill training, I feel like, for the marathon. But it was awesome getting back into it this week and seeing everyone out and about, and we had some nice weather during the week too. So can't complain.
Well, I'm going to be up there in not this week, but next week. I'm coming up next Thursday I'm staying in Londonderry, New Hampshire, and I'm going to run the Goffstown Gallop in Goffstown, New Hampshire on Saturday. And it's one of the oldest races in New England. It's his 46th year, but it's one of the few races that, back in the 70s and 80s, a race director would say, all right, this is a cool course. And they didn't care what the distance was. So it could be 7.6. It could be, his is 5.2. And he's never changed it. So a lot of people don't run it because it's 5.2. Oh, I'm not going to get I look at it as, first of all, you can compare year to year, but second of all, it'll be your 5.2 mile PR, and you can get your 5 mile time during it. And it's in Goffstown, so I helped the race director back in the day organize it, and he invites me back every year. So I'm bringing my son-in-law up, and we're going to run it, and then we're going to go to Boston afterwards and go to the Red Sox Blue Jays game. But on Friday, I'll be in Boston all day. I'll be walking around Boston. I want to show him. He's never been to Boston, so we're going to walk the streets of Boston, show him, the start of or the finish of the marathon, and go over to Cheers, go to different places. He's never been, so so I'll be walking around Boston. I don't think the recognition factor will be like during the Boston Marathon, where every other person seemed to know me. Uh, that was funny as heck. But every once in a while, I'll be in the grocery store and they go, "Are you the Slay the Day guy?"
That must be interesting. I feel like so many people run in Boston though. Like the percentage of runners per capita is like very high. So I feel like you would definitely still get recognized even just walking around the city.
Well, at the marathon, it was this year. It was funny. Like I said, I would hate to be a celebrity because I was stopped. If I was stopped once, I got stopped 1,000 times. And on Sunday, when I was walking around, I purposely wore a hoodie and sweatpants. So I was,
Wow, incognito Mike.
and I got a car drove by. I was walking down in Quincy Market, and a car full of college kids stopped the car, and these two girls jumped out and says, "Oh my gosh, it's Slay the Day. Can we get a picture?" Sure, it's fine. It's just funny. I think it's hysterical because I just started doing it last summer. The Slay the Day, Rep the Steps. I thought it was a cool moniker after I got done running. Everybody else on Run Talk talks about how fast and how far they went. I just choose to encourage people and have fun with it and make fun of me and so on and so forth. So I think that's why, I got a following, is because I don't take myself that serious anymore. But if we went back to when I was your age, I'd probably be right in there, like, did 20 miles at 6 minutes a mile and so on and so forth, because that's what we did.
Well, unfortunately, I am not that fast. Not yet, anyway.
You're
I'll
working
get
on
there.
it. You're
I'm
getting there
working on it.
faster.
I'll get there eventually. So hearing everyone talk about their training, it sounds like we're all enjoying the weather recently. Hopefully we can, up here in Boston at least, get a complete weekend of nice weather at least once before it gets cold again. But it's currently Sunday. Actually, it's Father's Day, so happy Father's Day, Mike. And although the morning was a little wet and cloudy, the skies are blue, the birds are chirping, and it's really days like today that make me grateful that I started running again. We always talk about the accessibility of running, and no matter where you are on your running journey today, and the weather and being outside is a great reminder of just how lovely it can be. So, Mike, we like to start off by asking all of our guests how they kind of got started with running. What initially drew you to running?
Well, it was kind of a funny beginning because, I was I grew up in the 60s, so I was a traditional baseball, basketball, football. I love the Red Sox, still love the Red Sox. So I played baseball, I played basketball. I wanted to make the Celtics, played football. And my freshman year in high school, basketball was my main sport. I was not great, but I was okay. And I tried out for basketball, and the coach, I was a little chunky, and the coach said to me, he says, "Mike, you should stop eating pancakes for breakfast and start eating Wheaties because you're fat." Now, nowadays, he'd be fired for harassment, but I took it to heart, and I played varsity baseball as a freshman, and I said to myself, well, I want to lose weight. And I knew our cross-country program at the school I went to, Pinkerton, was very good, and I wanted to try to make the team, so I started running that summer. And I ran a mile I don't know if it was a mile, because I don't know. I ran from my house to the track, which was dirt, ran around it a couple times and ran home. And it took me, I don't know, 8 minutes. So I said, well, that's a mile. And I looked like I was going to die. I ran in a pair of jeans too. And my mom says, what's wrong with you? And she says, you look really bad. And I says, I just ran a mile. And then I would go to the track and run, 4 laps, 8 laps, so on and so forth. So between my freshman and sophomore year, I dropped 15 pounds and grew about 3 inches. Well, back then, the coaches never saw you during the summer. Like there was no summer camps, anything. So I slimmed down, and the cross country coach was like, oh my gosh. And so I was one of the top 10 cross country runners on the team, but I was also a varsity basketball player. And it improved my jumping, it improved my stamina. And so I went through high school as a track, cross country, and basketball guy, but I was pretty good at basketball. So much so that my senior year, I was offered at Merrimack College in North Andover and went there, to play basketball. But I was still running to stay in shape. And the cross country coach saw me, and the cross country coach stopped his car. It was a priest. And he stopped his car, like he cut me off on the road. And he says, hey, do you go to Merrimack College? And I says, yes, sir. And he says, we got a cross country meet on Saturday. Could you run for us? And I says, I guess so. And he pulled over. I think he gave me a uniform right there. And it was like yellow and nothing on it, and blue shorts. And I show up to this cross country meet. I don't know how we got there. And Dave McGilvery, who went to Merrimack, was one of my teammates. He's the race director of the Boston Marathon. And so we became friends. And, I obviously continued running, continued playing basketball, but I got better at running during college and less better at basketball. And so I played all 4 years, but I played less. And I love the coaches. I love Merrimack College, everything about it, the whole experience. But running went like this, basketball went here. I was losing weight, and, I just really loved running. So my senior year, before my senior year of basketball, I qualified for the Boston Marathon. Like I went and ran a marathon, ran under 3 hours, which I said, I can do that. It took me 2 tries. I did it once and died 3:39. And then I went down to Jersey Shore Marathon and ran 2:58. And then played the entire basketball season, ran sometimes, and then went down to Boston and ran. I was under 3, so I requalified. And I give Dave McGilvery the credit because he inspired me.
Wow. That's so interesting. I feel like one of the themes that I know Brian and I have talked about is how almost every single person we've had on starts as some other athlete in a different sport, and they run just as a means of staying in shape. But then it all of a sudden starts to take more priority over the other sport, and they realize how great of a sport running can be, not only for your physical health, but also your mental health. And it just starts to take over your life in a really positive way.
When I talk to, the college kids, whether it's at Clemson or Anderson, whether they're a runner or a basketball player or anything like that, I said, you got to start thinking about, when you get done playing basketball, you get done playing soccer, you get done playing whatever it is, swimming. You're not going to have a coach telling you what to do. You're not going to have a training table unless you go pro, which very few people do. And I said, you've got to decide how to discipline yourself in some type of activity that keeps you sustainable. And I think basketball is one of those sports where I've seen a lot of people transition into running. I've seen it in football. I've seen it in all sports. But if you have the discipline to play football, to play basketball, especially in college, you have the discipline to train for a marathon. It's time management. That's what it's all about when you're in college. And that's what Merrimack College gave me because, I majored in accounting and marketing, a major, and got my education degree, played 3 sports and graduated on time. So I had the discipline to do that. But running has just been that big part of my life that I just absolutely love.
I have to say, Mike, too, we've had a few college athletes come on so far who've run different distances or recently retired college athletes, but you're certainly the first one whose recruitment story was the coach literally pulling over on the side of the road and handing you your uniform. That's pretty unbelievable.
The Merrimack College just contacted me, talking about a podcast. They contacted me and we did a FaceTime interview because now the alumnus wants to do an article about me running the Boston Marathon 48 times because they picked up on it. Because in one of my interviews, I said, I started as a senior at Merrimack College, home of the Warriors. I'm very proud of them. I always tell people I went to Merrimack, and it's been in any article that it's, been written in the Boston Globe. Boston.com did an article this spring after the Boston Marathon because of TikTok. And they did an article the next day in the Boston.com digital edition. And I never interviewed for that. They just did it. And I thought
Wow,
that was unique. And they picked everything up off of social media. Isn't that crazy?
that's
It is
interesting.
crazy. Social media is quite a connector of people. So, Mike, earlier you mentioned kind of running that first mile, and you said you didn't know if it was a mile or not, but you said it was about 8 minutes, and you thought you were dying right when you first started running. And that's something that I think we're super interested in discussing, because then you just mentioned your watch now. So obviously we all have fitness trackers on our wrists. When we go out for a run or you go for a race, you know exactly how far you're going, your mile splits, how long it's going to take you, elevation, the whole nine. When you first started out, and then for races too, before having finishing cams and chip times and GPS watches, how did timing work? How did you track your runs when you would go out to run?
It's funny. I just did a TikTok about today's terms with 1970s definitions. And one of the terms was Strava. And I said the definition of Strava in 1970 was get in your car, look at the odometer, measure it. Okay, now you got a distance, whether it's a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, and then look at your watch, which was a sweep second watch. I didn't have a digital watch. It was sweep second, and time it. Time it. It was sweep second watch. Or look at the clock on the wall. Well, it's about 5 after 5, and you go run 3 miles, which could be accurate. It might not be accurate because depending on the odometer. And that's how we measured our runs. And if I went to your house, Brian, you might have a short course or you might have a long course based on how you measured it. And you go to races and, we didn't have Ks when I started. It wasn't, you might have a 10K, but it was 5 mile, 10 mile, or 7.6, 9.2, very odd distances. And every time you'd finish, you'd finish and you get your time and you'd say, that course is long or that course, and it just was amazing. But the only thing that was accurate back then, for the most part, you had to run what was called a certified marathon. You still do. And a certified marathon meant that to qualify for Boston meant the course had to be certified by back then it was called AAU official, and it had to be measured on a calibrated wheel, which is a bicycle that has calibration to it. And so I got one of those calibration wheels on a bicycle. So I got my own. So I started measuring my own courses in the 80s. And so they're very accurate. And then I calibrated my car at the time. I wanted to see how close my car was. And my car was extremely close. So I had pretty good idea, my courses that I ran personally. But you might go to a marathon. My PR for the marathon was 2:31 and change, but it wasn't certified, and it wasn't 26 miles. It was, I think, 25.5, especially when you run the last mile in 4:30 or something, you say, I think that's a little bit short. I'm not going to take credit for that 2:31, but 2:35 at Marine Corps on a certified course is legit. And of course, Boston is always legit as far as the certification. But yeah, we didn't have a lot to work with, whether it was shoes, technology, phones, the safety. People talk about dishonesty in running. I know that, if you put something on TikTok, like there's a kid that he says, I'm running a half marathon on the treadmill for 120 straight days to break the Guinness World Book of Records. How do we know that he's actually doing that just by him running on it? How do we know? I'm sure he is. I'm not discounting him, but we don't know. Or the people that come on there, I just did 5 miles at 4:38 pace and my heart rate is 120. How do we know? Do we really know? And back then you just never told anybody. Like you would train and you would write it down, and unless somebody asked you, you didn't really share a lot. There wasn't, and I don't do Strava just for that reason. I don't care to share what I'm doing. I care what other people do. I'm more interested in what they're doing. How can I help you? What are you doing? Are you running fast all the time? Is that why you're plateauing? Which a lot of people do. They just hammer every single day. And that's current. And that's also, it was like that in the 80s. Like people would run fast all the time. And then I go to a race and I was described as the slowest training fast runner that anybody's ever seen. Like I trained very slow back then, but I'd go to a race and do very well. Especially in the marathon distance. If I was running 6 minutes a mile for a marathon, I train at 7:30s, which was considered slow. But I learned from the best too. So
you were running in zone 2 before everyone was.
I guess back then we just went like this. We took the carotid heart rate, and if it was below 120, and you could tell if you were gassed, and I've seen heart rate monitors, I've seen all the technology over the years, and I just said I run on the way I feel, and I know how I feel, I know what it's supposed to feel like, and there's nothing better when you hit a stretch, when you peak. Like I didn't really peak as a runner till in my 30s. And I got really fast one summer. I think it was 19. I was 32 years old, and I was low 16s for 5K. And then all of a sudden, I'm running in the low 15s for 5K. Like it just whoosh, and everything, PRs at all distances. And it just, I don't know if it was the biking. I was doing a lot of biking, cross training, everything. And it just all hit at once. And there's nothing like a feeling going out in a race and you hit the first mile in like 4:55 and you go, man, that was easy.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome.
So those are some good days. Now, if I hit, well, I think in a 5K right now, I'm like, in the eights if I run a 5K, but I really don't like to hurt anymore. So that's a terrible excuse. I mean, last year I ran like 3 half marathons under 2 hours, and I go, why am I doing that to myself? I enjoy running. I just love it. I absolutely love it, and I want to keep moving until I can't, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. You were talking about all the technology we have now with the chip timing and how you just didn't have that back in the day and how you kind of just had to rely on people's word for it. And I feel like in a lot of ways, people talk about the negative aspects of all this technology and running, and they're like, oh, let's go back to the simpler days, which makes a lot of sense, but also it kind of forces you to be honest with everyone else, but then also with yourself. But that being said, when you're being dishonest with yourself, even back before Strava, the only person you end up really hurting is yourself. It doesn't matter what you have written down in your journal. Oh, I ran a 3-minute mile or something like that.
Yes.
At the end of the day, you're going to have to prove, or you're going to have to show up for the race. And then that's where you actually have to test your abilities.
You're 100% right if you can't be true to yourself. So people lied back then. They did. And I'll give you an example. Qualifying for Boston. Let's say I go to Chicago in 1981 and Brian wants to qualify for Boston, and I run under Brian's name and I run 2:45. Brian couldn't run say you couldn't run a 2:45. You're
not yet. Give me a couple of years.
Say you were stuck at 3:06 and the qualifying time back then was 2:50, which it was. I would run a 2:45. I'd go under your name because there was no, back then you just sign your name, and then you get a certificate in the mail because I have your address. The certificate comes to you. It says, Brian, 2:45:07 at Chicago. You take it, you photocopy it, and send it to Boston as your qualifier. That's dishonesty. That existed all the time. I can promise you that.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you bring that up because there is another, I guess, form of that happening now with Strava. And it's this idea of Strava mules, where people will pay other people to run workouts with their phones so they can either show their friends that they're very fast or show their friends that they're very slow and then run a race in a really fast time. And then their friends are like, oh my gosh, how did you run that fast? You were only training at 12-minute mile pace and you just ran like a 16-minute 5K.
Yeah. And I don't know the point of that. What you see is what you get with me. I can show you certificates of 5:30 marathons, which I did at Boston this year because I took my time after Boston College. I was having fun and the fan base was unbelievable. I can show you a 2:35 marathon. I can show you a 2:40, a 2:50, 3 hours. I've run 111 total marathons, and I haven't broken down, but 33 of them were under 3 hours. And I probably could show you a validation of every single one because I kept those certificates, whether it was Bay State or Boston or Montreal. New York City, back then we had to run fast in order to requalify, or you just wanted to run faster. I probably beat ourselves up, too much. I did a lot of 2:30 marathons. I can tell you that. High 2:30s.
Yeah.
So, Mike, running has definitely been having a moment recently, and I think a lot of this could be credited to social media and a lot of this influence. Like, I think there's a lot of people on TikTok, and it's getting a lot of press, I think, just in different places online. I think Francis and I were both interested in learning a little bit more about how you've seen running change throughout your career running, and especially now considering the role that social media is playing and these new technologies. We talk about watches, we talk about Strava, and I'm curious, what are some things that you like about how running has changed, and what are some things maybe that you miss about how running was when you first started getting into it?
That's a great question. I started running when running was unpopular. I started in the early 70s and it was just starting to evolve. Arthur Lydiard, James Fix, all these theories, Jack Daniels theories, and training and so on and so forth. And then in the in 72, of course, Dave Waddle won the 800 meters at the Olympics, and that became a big deal. He's the one that came from behind and won the 72 Olympics at Munich. And then it started to, take shape in the late 70s, and it was the first running boom. Footwear companies, which I was involved, I worked for Nike and Converse in the early 80s. So I saw that boom. It was all the clothing companies and everybody's running, women. And that was the big thing. Women were not encouraged to run in the early 70s. Now they were coming up, and it became this huge quote unquote boom. You could go back in runner's world and it's that boom is now like it is now where everybody is starting to run. And then it kind of plateaued a little bit, in the 90s, because now you're getting the cross training and the CrossFit games, and this is better for you and running's bad for you and so on and so forth. So I've seen it boom, 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 but it's always been there. And then in the last 15 years, the popularity of the big marathons like Boston, New York, Chicago, where they have to do a lottery system. I'd say for the last quarter century, it's been huge, especially Boston, that so many people apply, they're trying to qualify, but we have a bigger population as far as that goes. So I love to see running, where it's at. I absolutely love it. And I don't discourage anybody, and, the TikTok thing, some people annoy me. I'll be honest with you. They come on there every day and they're telling how fast and how far they run, and people don't. You see it once or twice, and after a while, it's boring. I'm sorry. I like it, but I'll skip over it. I want I want to hear a success story. Losing weight. I love the kid that's on there that's like 512 pounds and he's walking 10,000 steps a day and he's lost like 120 pounds, but he's still 500 pounds. He's red in the face and everything. That's what I like to see. I like to see people, really get into it. And then, the people that are trying to Boston qualify that, know everything about running and they're 23 years old. It's hard for me to swallow that because they're talking like they're experts on how to qualify for Boston. And it's hard to listen to sometimes because you're thinking, okay, that's one way to do it. I believe the reason I qualified for Boston all those years was the long run. The long run. Every weekend I would do a 22 or 24-mile run at 7:30 pace every weekend throughout the year, 50 weeks out of the year. And that was the key to my strength, as far as being able to adapt to a 6 minute or 6:10 or 6:20 mile for 26 miles. I was just very consistent and, had the leg turnover and so on and so forth. It was just what we did. And in talking to Dick Beardsley, who again was before your time, who ran 2:08 2:08 three times in his career. We were talking, and he can't run anymore. He just had knee replacement, can't run at all. And we're talking. I said, Dick, that's what we used to do. We just ran fast. We trained and we ran, and that's the way it was. And back then, in all due respect to Boston, Boston didn't have anybody that ran over 4 hours. It was just everybody finished under 4 hours. Like if you went to the Boston Marathon, it was done after 4 hours. Like there was no charity runners. There was no slow people like me. That's just the way it was. It's changed a lot. It's become more of a like people, that's your goal. I want to run a half marathon. I want to run a marathon, no matter what the speed, 6 hours, 8 hours. I love that. I love it. Some people disagree. They can disagree if they want. But if you've got a human being moving their body for 6.5 or 7 or 7.5 hours, good for them. Good for them. It's better than laying on the couch for 6.5 hours, in my opinion. So I'm supportive of everybody. I'm that guy.
Yeah, one of the things that we like to say is if you're out on a run, no matter how slow it is, you're faster than the guy on the couch.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's almost more impressive, I feel like, to be on your feet running a marathon for 6 hours. Like that takes a different type of like mental fortitude than the people who are running at like a 2:10 say.
Yes.
I mean, obviously the 2:10 people are putting in a ton of effort in training and they're putting in so many miles on the back end, but they're also done. After 2 hours and 10 minutes, they're done. They're hanging out at the finisher's line and they're grabbing their free banana. And then you have people who are 3 hours away from finishing.
You know Bill Rogers, I'm sure. Bill and I had this conversation because we're good friends and we were in the same running circle, but not the same speed. And Bill and I talked years back, and he said, Mike, he says, and this is when he was running 2:08, 2:09, 2:10, and his history is amazing. He said the exact same thing. He goes, I don't consider myself a marathoner. Those people are out there for 4 and 4.5 hours. Those are the real heroes. So I saw him 3 years ago at Boston. He's like, Mike, you're still running. Congratulations. That's so impressive. I says, well, Bill, you won it 4 times. He says, no, you're out there still. And I says, Bill, I'm one of those guys that's taken 4 and 5 hours now. So I am one of those guys that has to be on his feet. And it's still the same enjoyment. It just takes longer. That's all. It's not the heart, it's the legs. My legs just don't move as fast and they're worn out. I have 148,000 miles because I've tracked my miles in a notebook, and it's 148,000 plus miles on my body. I've written down all my mileage and I have it recorded, and that's a lot of miles,
That's like the warranty on a car? Like you
Yes.
you voided the warranty.
Yes. So I'm the graces of God, I'm, still moving, and that's, that to me is a blessing and I still enjoy it.
Nice. That's beautiful. You mentioned following people on TikTok and really loving to see the community and loving to see people putting in the work and really getting a lot out of running. You're pretty big on running TikTok. Can you tell us a little bit about how that first started?
Well, first I had to get a cell phone. So I didn't have a cell phone till 2021. I didn't have a cell phone. I had a flip phone and I used it to make calls, but not take calls. I just didn't believe in a cell phone. But my children, my son is now 24 and my daughter's 28. My son was in college. My daughter had graduated from college, but they lived, I was living in Georgia. Melanie was in South Carolina and Jared was in Milledgeville, Georgia. And I wanted to be in better contact with them. And for safety reasons, my kid says, you got to get a cell phone. You got to get a cell phone. So I got a smartphone, I guess you call it. I had social media. I had Facebook, but I just used the computer. And so then, I saw this app called TikTok and people are making videos. And so I made one and it was running related and it was just funny. And, when you start out with TikTok, you get 40 likes and 200 views. And that went, for about a year. And then I went to Boston and I think it was 2023. And I made that TikTok at BC where I ripped my shirt off and, I have the shirt that says I love Wellesley College and I rip it off at BC and I have one underneath that says I love Boston College. So I made a TikTok out of that and that, it got some pretty good action, maybe 30,000 views. And then you fast forward to 2024. That's when it really started going big. I would make a TikTok once a month, but not real big. I had maybe 1,500 followers, but Boston in 2024, I made a finish line TikTok and it went viral. Like it went 2.1 million views. And it was a terrible video. Like it was awful. I'm drooling. I'm like, oh, I'm finishing. It got picked up by everybody. It went on Instagram. I actually sold it. And that probably doubled my followers. And then last summer of 2024, I started to move to South Carolina. So after every run, I would do something, informational, like encouraging people, but never saying how fast I was. In fact, I made one, I'm so slow that a dog peed on me today because he thought I was a tree, or, or my Garmin said, put it in calendar mode because you're so slow. And so that went pretty good. But then I started the slay the day, rep the steps, and that caught on. That really caught on. And last summer, it really went kind of, not viral, but pretty good. And I didn't have 10,000 followers till the first of the year of 2025. That's when I hit 10,000. Once the first of the year turned around, everything changed. And I don't know why. I have no idea why. My followers started going crazy. I was talking about training for the Boston Marathon, and every time I finished running, I go, I just completed 10 miles, slay the day, rep the steps. And those videos started going boom, 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 boom. And then one day I finished my run and I said, motion is lotion and exercise is the potion. And that went viral. And then after that, everything started. Woof, woof. By the time I got to Boston, I had, all these people that were following me. I think it was 16,000. In Boston Marathon weekend, I gained 18,000 followers.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And
that's incredible.
I was strategic. I wore those shirts when I went to pick up my number. I wore the shirt that said, I love Boston College. I wore it to the expo. I had people sign it and everybody wanted to sign it. So we made a TikTok out of that. And then Boston Marathon weekend just was magical. And then the marathon itself, people were just amazing. The amount of recognition at Boston Marathon, I had no idea how many people knew who I was. And I'm not saying that to impress you. When I got to BC, I was feeling good. I had been doing a run walk and I says, well, I'm going to run the rest of the way. I'm going to finish in under 5 hours. I got to BC, those kids at BC, I can't say enough good things about them. They had t-shirts with my name on them, slay the day.
Oh my
they had
goodness.
signs, and they were like, it was like they were waiting for me. And so I made a TikTok there, but a girl, Adrienne Curtis, videoed me tearing the shirt off, and she posted it, and that went viral. And that's why all these media sources picked it up, because they told me that I was the number one social media person at the Boston Marathon.
Wow.
I don't know how they measure that, but they said you were the biggest presence at the Boston Marathon. And this is a guy that didn't have a cell phone 4 years ago. Isn't that funny?
That's unbelievable, Mike. I think the catchphrase seems to really resonate with people. I think slay the day, rep the steps. You said, what was the other one? Motion is
lotion and exercise is the potion. I think part of the allure, if you will, is I don't take myself serious. Like I don't. I was unaware of all the TikToks that were going on during the marathon. Like I had no idea that other people were TikToking me. And so it took me a couple weeks after the marathon, my daughter sent me like 30 TikToks of me. But I did, you know what I mean? Like people were like, he's our number one fan. I was aware that people were cheering and, wanting a high five, want a hug. So my attitude the last 6 miles, okay, if you call my name out and you have a sign, do you think I'm going to ignore you? No, I'm going to go over to the sidelines and I'm going to high five you, or some girls wanted to have a sweaty hug, which was fine. I said, I'm going to walk the rest of the way if I have to, but I'm going to acknowledge every single one of these people. So when I got finished the marathon, I had run 28 miles.
Oh, wow.
So I was going like this, the
just
whole
zigzagging
6 miles. I went backwards one time at Boston College because, I couldn't resist Mike, and that's part of the fact that you acknowledge the fans. I think that's part of the whole Boston Marathon experience. Not one of those people said, man, you're slow. They never said that. They were like, you're killing it. They know I'm older, I run like an old man. I am old. I am, but I'm blessed, so I keep it fun. I don't take myself serious. You'll get one naysayer once out of 999 comments are positive, and somebody will say, how does he qualify? He doesn't even look like he can run anymore. And I would challenge that person, if they were on the couch. I'd say, let's go for a 5K run and see what happens here. You're gonna get trolls. You're gonna get that's life. Some people don't like slay the day, rep the steps. It's fine. I didn't do it to impress anybody. I just started saying it, and it's gone kind of crazy. I'm not making merch. I'm not doing anything to try to monetize off of that. I do like the merch that I get from shoe companies because we all need shoes, right?
This is true, yeah.
Of course.
So that's been the biggest thing for me, is getting merch from, the Asics and Brooks, and OnCloud has been huge. Runner. And then a lot of like Pop-Tarts, because I did a video about this is how I fuel before a race, and I just held up a box. It was a 5-second video. It got 2 million views. And so Pop-Tarts just sent me a box of, like, a big, huge box of all these flavors. It was great. So
See, we're gonna have to take notes from you, Mike, because there's a couple fuels that Francis and I are both really fond of, and we're gonna have to figure out how to get people to send us some free stuff.
Well, fueling, and that's another subject. Your fueling for your generation is different than my fueling because we didn't have what you have. So I was brought up with, I call it snacky snacks. Before you'd run, you'd have a Snickers bar, or then it evolved into a Pop-Tart. I do Pop-Tarts. And fueling on the run was D-Fizz soda for your drink. I was pre-Gatorade. So as well as not ever running with, headphones, I didn't, the goo, the gels, the stingers, all this stuff. In my little fanny pack that I took at Boston this year, I had a zebra cake and a peanut butter and jelly Uncrustables and just Smarties, the little candy that you pop. I popped some of those at 16, had a zebra cake at 18, and I was good to go, baby. Let's go.
Nice.
And, but back in the day, I think I ran at 82, for an example. I ran 237. I don't think I stopped for anything. I think I just ran like the entire way. I might have taken some water, but they had the replacement drink in that generation, 82, was called Gluconade. It was a powdered electrolyte replacement drink. It was called ERG, electrolyte replacement Gluconade. And you drink it, and it was like powdered Gatorade. But I believe that Boston, I just hammered it the whole time. Like I said, the crowds were like an accordion. Like weren't that many people around me at 237. So if you saw somebody in front of you, the crowd would just like collapse. And then when you came through, it would open up. And policemen were on horses to get the crowds back in Kenmore Square. And most of the time, the horses would drop a load in Kenmore Square. So you had to dodge, the poop there. But you could run into a drunk fan, that was out there in the way. That would happen quite often. But yeah, I didn't worry about what I was drinking back then. Now I'm out there so long, I almost have to have a 3-course meal, We didn't have the amenities and the racing shoes, and the stuff I had it fit me at the time. I ran when I ran 237, I was running in a Converse racing flat, which weighed 6 ounces. It's just a one-piece blown EVA midsole, and it was one and done. I ran the race, the shoe was destroyed, and I threw them out afterwards. That's what you did. Nike's made some good racing shoes like the Air Mariah, and you just ran in them, raced in them, and then the midsole would just go like that. But these carbon-plated shoes and all that, I just wear training shoes. I wore OnClouds this year. I've never worn OnClouds in my life. I didn't even know they made running shoes until they sent them to me.
Wow.
So OnCloud sent me clothing, shoes, hat, everything. They're so nice to me. They're so nice. And they said, "Can we send you another pair of shoes?" And I says, "Sure," you know.
Yeah, I know when we started the podcast, Brian and I said that if we got free shoes out of it, it would have been worth it. And then we could kind of hang up the shoes and kind of call it quits. And then I think it was our fourth episode. One of our buddies who works for Nike brought us free shoes. And we were like, well, that's only the fourth episode. So I guess we should probably stick around for at least a little bit longer. Now we're on episode 20. So yeah.
Nice, nice.
You talk about your meteoric rise on TikTok, especially in the last year. Do you think that your online presence has impacted your relationship with running at all?
I do. I think that people, if I go live, I do go live every once in a while. People ask questions and they value my opinion on training or injuries or what should I do for this, you know, so on and so forth. They value that. And it's nothing against the younger generation, but if you've run 3 marathons, you're not an expert. You know, I'm not an expert, but I can tell you there's certain things you shouldn't do. Like I did a pre-Chicago and a pre-New York City marathon tips about both marathons, and it got huge response from people that they just don't think it's if you go to New York City and it's your first marathon, my gosh, there's so many things that you wouldn't know, like, you know, getting to the start and how to, you know, getting to the start and the fact that you've got to start at like 4 in the morning and you don't run until 11, and fueling, it's a completely different animal than your training runs. Like you get up in the morning, say if you run at 6:30 in the morning, your long runs, you're not running at 6:30 in the morning in New York City. You've got to fuel and go to the bathroom 7 times, and you've got to replenish. It's Boston's the same way. You don't start Boston until 10:30. And so making them aware, or the grading on the bridge, going into Manhattan, it's very, like, I don't know, it's metal and it's tough, and there's some good hills in New York too, and you have to be aware of that course and the crowds and so on and so forth. So same with Chicago, and you never know the weather either. So I think they respect the fact that I'm older and willing to give them advice without sounding like I'm an expert. Some people come off like, you've got to do this. This is, you know, I usually talk about mistakes, like a video about my 5 biggest mistakes in marathon running. And that's more of an approach that, you know, you're human, and people will follow that and appreciate that. But I know I don't like the word influencer, because I feel like an influencer is looking to promote products for personal benefit. I could give a rat's behind whether, you know, Nike or, you know, I love the fact that they do, but that's not why I'm doing this. And I don't look to monetize like some people do. I don't care. That's not what I'm in this for. I want to encourage people to run. It's just as important for me tomorrow morning when there's no TikToking going on, where I'm out with the Easley High School cross country kids, and it's a kid that's never run before and he's struggling at the 2-mile mark. And I'll say, come on, Francis, tag along with the old man." And all of a sudden the kid starts running, and all of a sudden he passes me, because he's saying to himself, well, if that old fart can do it, I can do it too. So that's yes, I do think that people respond to my running advice, and they tell me in the lives, they go, "You're the only person I listen to," or you get a something on a comment, or somebody will private message me and say, "Hey, I was really down this morning. I was really thinking of doing something bad to myself, but when I see your Slay of the Day, Rough the Steps, I got up and I did something." That's worth it. I mean, that's what it's all about, encouraging life, you know, in general. And I think that's the cool thing about it. And even though I'll never meet these people, I think it's a good thing. So people go, "Are you going to go to New York? Are you going to go to Chicago?" And the answer to that question is, if somebody invites me. So I don't think I should be an invited runner to run a marathon, but I think I'd be a good catch for a company like Runner, which at the Boston Marathon, I did a thing for them. But to do a shakeout run for that company, you bring me to the marathon, I'll do a shakeout run, because you're going to get somebody that's not world class, but everybody knows that's approachable. You know, if you came up to me in the street at Boston, no matter who you were, came up to me and said, "Oh, can I take a picture?" Of course. Let's stop. Let's talk. What's your goal? Not just say hi, not just take a picture. Let's talk. And I think that's the big difference between somebody that's an influencer that's unapproachable.
Mike, so something that Francis and I have talked about is how, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, because something that's really cool about TikTok and this social media influence is you can discover people and learn about people's stories. And I think it's so cool that you were in a situation where you could go viral and so many people could learn about this journey of longevity that you've had and how long you've been able to run and kind of learn from your story. But the other side of that is, I think TikTok can definitely give a megaphone to these experts or the influencers who don't necessarily, like you said, if they've run 3 marathons, they don't know everything about it, but they have a megaphone to be telling everyone, oh, this is what you need to be doing. This is the gear that you need to have. So I think the basis and the whole place where Francis and I were coming from is we started the podcast training for our first marathons, going into this saying, we don't know absolutely anything, but we're meeting all these people with different backgrounds, different experiences. Every single person that we've had on has a different take, whether it comes to nutrition and shoes and the role that running plays in their life and their mentalities and setting goals. And I think it's cool just learning about all these different backgrounds of people. But I absolutely see where you're coming from the influencer standpoint. Everyone thinks that they're an expert, but I don't know if that's always the case.
And I'm not. I'm definitely not. And I think I have experience, and I was brought up that you should listen to old people because they've been on the planet longer than you, and maybe they've done something that you don't want to do. It's just as important to tell people your mistakes as it is your successes. And if I just say to you, well, I ran, Marine Corps marathon, my average pace was blankety blank, and I ended up averaging 5:54 a mile, which I did. And I wrote it down. My fastest mile was 5:37 and my slowest mile was 6:04. That's pretty consistent. But how did I get there, and so on and so forth? But not to be bragging, I did that. I can't do that anymore, but I certainly could help somebody get there. But it's all relative, whether you're running 6 minutes a mile, 7 minutes a mile, 8 minutes a mile. And I think the beauty of my story, it's different from others, is I've been the front of the packer and I've been the back. Now I'm the back of the packer. I mean, I'm very honest. I think I came in ahead of like a little over 2,000 people at Boston, and I've come in the top 100 at Boston. And most of the people, they're in my category at Boston. Like there's 120 people that have run 25 or more straight Boston marathons. That's what it's called, the quarter century club. There's 120 people. And of those 120 people, number 5, according to their list. So there's 4 people ahead of me. Most of the people that are ahead of me or in that top 10 were very fast when they were younger. But I was one of the fastest of the fast people. Do you know what I mean? Like if you look at everybody and you say, there was nobody that was like an Olympian. There was just, I think the fastest time probably was about 2:28, which I was pretty close to. But, everybody was kind of that, and they just stuck with it. But we're one pothole, we're one heart attack, we're one whatever it might be, the C word, you just never know. You never know. And I always thank the Lord for that. And he'll tell me when it's time to not do it anymore. In fact, you were talking about cross training and strength training. January 1st this year, I was thinking of not running Boston because I just didn't feel right in my legs and my back. So I went to physical therapy and I said, I want you to fix me up. I hired a doctor, not a trainer, a doctor. And she was a doctor of physical therapy. I invested $3,000 for 3 months, and she put me through a grind. It was just 30 minutes twice a week. And then I would do the exercises on my own. And I put TikToks of those up, and people like those because they saw the fact that I was doing something other than running in order to get ready for Boston. And it put me over the edge. I became a stronger runner, and my posture improved, everything, and gave me great strength. And that was a difference in me running versus not running, but it was great.
Yeah, and you talk about this aggregated knowledge of years and years of running. And I feel like nowadays with social media, a lot of times people want things right away. They want it instantaneously, and they want those top 5 tips that are going to make them qualify for Boston. And I mean, there are ways, there are suggestions and training plans to qualify for Boston, but it's so much more nuanced than that. And when you look at the training styles of today versus the training styles of like 30 years ago, I feel like a lot of it is very similar. And you don't need all this specialized equipment or this specialized like nutrition and stuff like that. There's tried and true methods that have worked for people for many, many years. And one of the things that I feel really lucky is that my coach right now is, I think, around the same age as you, Mike. And he has a ton of knowledge from all of his running. And he really didn't get into running until after he graduated from college and was in his, mid to upper 30s. And he's been able to take a lot of that and impart a lot of that great wisdom onto me. And so I feel really thankful that I have someone who has been around and has run in tons of races and is still running to this day and is able to kind of let me know exactly what I should be doing, what I shouldn't be doing, and doesn't make it seem like it's this or that. It's not black and white. It's very nuanced. Everyone's a little bit different. You got to find the plan that works for you, and that's really what it is all about, is this journey of self-discovery.
And that's 100% because everybody's different. Whether it's nutrition, and my nutrition was terrible when I was in those 230, 240, 250 years. I ate whatever I want. I ate macaroni and cheese, pizza, brownies. There was no nutrition facts back then. You just ate. One of my friends who was 218 marathon, he said, Mike, some people are candles, some people are furnaces. We're furnaces, so we can eat whatever we want. And he ate like coffee rolls and chips before a marathon and go out and run 218. And Bill Rogers, I was at his house or apartment once, and he goes, Mike, you want something to eat? This is after we had run 20 miles, and I didn't run with him. I ran the same time as him, but not with him because he was ahead of me. We finished, and he took out a pizza out of the refrigerator, and it was cold. And he just spread mayonnaise on it and started eating. And
oh my God.
He drank beer. Bill's a great guy, but his nutrition was terrible. But boy, could he run. But what worked for Bill didn't work for me. What works for me may not work for Brian or friend. Everybody's different. So you have to discover what's best for you. For me, it was higher mileage, but not hard. I just think people run too hard all the time. And like I said, when I see these guys, I see people advertising themselves as full-time coaches on TikTok. And because they've run a 248 marathon or a 244, I'm Mike and I've run a 244 marathon. And I can tell you how to get there. No, I can't. And they've done it once. And it's hard for me to swallow that. Like, you're advertising that. And I also believe that coaches, if you're giving advice online, I don't know how you could charge anybody. And I really don't. I'm sorry. Because you don't see them.
Yeah.
You don't see them. And I like working with people in person. I like giving advice, but I'll write a plan, but you got to do it. But what's easy? What's hard? You have to explain that all to them. And like I said, everybody's different. So it's hard. I don't dislike them. I just go, "Ooh, wow, that's incredible right there." And I think that's the difference between me and most people. I don't say I'm a professional coach. I have coached, but it's all at the high school level and college level. And I work with the kids, and everybody's different. So one kid on the team might have to do this, and another kid on the team might have to do that. That's how we treat them. And I've worked with Olympians, everybody, and they're all different.
Yeah, and I think everyone definitely has different philosophies about kind of what works for them. And I'm sure you've seen it. Every single person who's run has different strategies for, oh, this worked for me, this didn't work for me. And you're absolutely right. I don't think there's one recipe, a checklist that you could follow of, if you do this, you could be a 244 marathoner. I think you're absolutely right. Everyone runs differently.
And you're going to go on TikTok tonight, and you're going to be scrolling, and you're going to see those guys that I'm talking about. And not to be, badmouth them. It's just you're going to say to yourself, "That's what Mike was talking about,"
Yep.
because you know they,
I know who you're talking about too, Mike.
yeah,
I've seen them.
yeah, and
And
so.
I've tried their advice and it does not work for me.
and you lose me when you start talking about zone 2, zone 3, zone. I just if I'm breathing hard, then I say that's I'm out of breath. I'm gassed. I don't. I know what our terms are: anaerobic and aerobic. Those are the two things. And heart rate was always relevant. And if you're out of breath, you're going up the hill, you slow down. Even
Definitely.
even back then, you would slow down. And the key to running fast back then was if you did hill work, you had to maintain that. If you're doing fartleks going up a hill, the ability to maintain that pace going over the hill. So you might catch somebody going uphill, but if you're gassed at the top, how are you recovering on the downhill? It's all, that's stuff that not too many people talk about, You got to be able to, that's why I like fartlek training personally.
Yeah, I think one of the advantages that Brian and I have is we both have personal relationships with our coaches as well. Brian's being coached by a good friend of ours, Devin, who we've had on the podcast prior. And then my coach is actually one of my dad's best friends from high school. So for my first, or I guess it was my first ever attempt at a half marathon, he actually came and he watched me run and parked with my dad at different stops along the route to cheer me on, which was really great. And then, we had a whole debrief afterwards and he was like, these are the things you did really well. These are the things that you could work on. And that was really valuable for me.
That's what you need. I think you need somebody in person personally, but what do I know?
A 2:35
So-
marathon. That's what you know.
Yeah, I think you're being a little humble there, Mike. We're talking about all these TikTok experts that know everything about running, but I think you're probably the only person on TikTok that's ran 111 marathons and ran Boston 48 times. So I think you got to know something just to have the longevity to keep running at that level for that long.
So let's just say I came on TikTok and you met me for the first time on TikTok and I come on, hey, I'm Mike Beeman. I ran 2:35 for the marathon. I've run 111 marathons, including 48 Bostons. If that's the first words out of my mouth, that's not, I just don't believe that. And I've never done that. I just say, well, I don't even do an intro. I usually say something about the old guy here, giving you some advice. I don't get serious that often, and I'm usually dabbing and slay the day, rep the steps, so on and so forth,
Something that Francis and I are super interested in is hearing about your race experiences over time. We do mention running all those marathons, Boston 48 times. I know there are ways that the Boston Marathon has changed in that time period. But a question we wrote that I think Francis and I are interested in hearing is if you could choose to run any race in history at any time, which race would it be?
A race that I ran?
Or one that
Or a race that you didn't run that you could run
that you
right
would
now.
like to have been around for.
Boston or any
Whichever,
race?
any race.
Any race.
That's a tough question, That's I think that I would have loved to have run Boston in 1975. It was the run for the hoses, and Jack Foltz won that. I was a freshman in college, and it was the hottest Boston Marathon up to 2012. The attrition rate, I think there was like 4,000 starters and less than 1,000 people finished. So that's one that I probably would have definitely liked to run. And then just maybe some of the Bostons in the 60s when the field was so small and, they were running in sandals, so to speak, I ran my first Boston Marathon on the pair of Nike Nylon Cortez, and that's a leisure shoe. That's the shoe that Forrest Gump ran in. That's what I ran in my first Boston Marathon. It was black with orange, and we thought it was a state-of-the-art running shoe, and it's a leisure shoe now. And so, that was. But yeah, I think 75 would have been pretty cool. So that would be fun. And I've had the chance to run in, like I said, Montreal, Chicago, New York, LA, a lot of different marathons. Bermuda is one of the most underrated marathons in the world. They have it in the third week of January. I ran that like 8 times, and that's a lot of fun because it's on an island, it's warm, and Boston's usually 80 below zero
Yeah,
in
true.
January. So, but Boston has just been so much fun for me. Those have been highlights for me all years, including 2018, where it hurricaned and it rained and it borderline snow. There was 30-mile-an-hour headwinds. That thing was awful. I was said to myself, I'm not going to finish this. There's no way. But I did. You get out there and the fans are still out there and you're freezing. And I wore sweatpants and they were just soaked. And so I get to Natick and they were bringing down my shorts, but my hands were so cold I couldn't take them off. So this would only happen at the Boston Marathon. I went off to the sideline and I said to two guys, I said, "Can you lift me up and pull my pants off?" "Oh, we got you, buddy." And it was three guys. Two guys lifted me up and the other guy took my pants off and I held my shorts. And so now I'm running in shorts. And so that was a relief. So I get to Newton Lower Falls and my hands are freezing. I had gloves on and they're soaking wet. I'm going into hypothermia. My teeth are chattering. I says, I'm going to die. So I was going to go into Nike Wellesley and get some new running gear and call my daughter while I was there and get my credit card. Well, this woman on the side, she had mittens on. And I said, "Ma'am," I says, "you don't know me. Please, can I have your mittens? You'll save my life." And she goes, "I got something better." What are the chances out of everybody at the Boston Marathon? This woman had those hand warmers that hunters have. She had like 6 of them. She put one in one hand, one in the other, and she put 4 down my shirt.
Wow.
It's good to go. You tell me that that's not godsend. I mean, that was just incredible. What a great story that is. So I kind of got off track there, but
No, that's incredible. It sounds like the Boston Marathon every single time is the one you would pick.
oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the reaction I got this year and then the press that people said, that I'm not Mr. Boston or anything, but to the kids at BC and some of the people on TikTok, if they hold me as a special person for Boston, then I'm going to take that role seriously and say thank you and be that good role model for them.
Yeah, and then this has been a huge treat. I mean, I think when I messaged you on one of your TikTok lives, I did not expect you to respond and certainly did not expect you to actually start up this dialogue. And I'm super grateful that you were able to take the time to talk with us. But we have, I guess, just one question for you to kind of wrap things up. What is a piece of advice that you would give someone starting their running journey today? They want to go out, they want to start.
I would do, first of all, I do a run walk. Like I tell my daughter that. And when she starts up running, she goes off and on. Start with a run walk and be concerned more about how much time on your feet you're doing as opposed to timed runs, like timed miles. Don't care about, oh, my mile's only a 10-minute mile or 11-minute mile. Be concerned. I did 20 minutes of running and walking today. Okay. Could I have done more? Yes. And then you move on and so on and so forth. So be patient. Don't be hard on yourself. And you're going to have good days and bad days. I can promise you that because I have more good days, but I have days where like, what am I doing? Patience is probably the biggest key, but as long as you're doing something, even if you can get out there for 10 minutes. She wants to do something tonight over at the YMCA track. I'll go over with her and do she's going to probably do a 1.5 miles where you do straights and curves, go to a track and and don't compare yourself to others. That's the other big thing. Comparison is the thief of joy. It really is. And, like I said, I'm in my 7th year. There's a lot of 70-year-olds faster than me. There's a lot of 70-year-olds slower than me, and there's some 70-year-olds that aren't with us anymore. So I bless myself and say, I'm truly okay with that.
That is awesome. I feel like you hit the nail right on the head. So I guess that's all we really have time for. We usually like to finish up with a fun fact. I don't have one prepped. I don't know, Brian, if you have one. Maybe Mike, do you have a fun fact that you want to share with us?
Fun facts, besides being a college basketball player and baseball player, I was actually better at rowing, like a scull, like on the head of the Charles. Fun fact, I qualified for the Olympic trials in rowing with an 8, but I'm one of the few people that have run the Boston Marathon and the head of the Charles in the same calendar year.
Wow.
Isn't that funny?
That is a
So,
great fun fact.
and I'm sure there's others. I'm sure there is, but I can't. I think it was 92. I ran the 92 Boston Marathon in that fall in October when the head of the Charles is. I think I was, I don't know if I was an individual or an 8 or a 4. I was in all sorts of boats, but I was a pretty good rower too. And I think athletically, I was never great at anything. I was a college basketball player, but I wasn't great. I was on a Division II team, but I wasn't the best player. Not the best runner. I'm okay, but and my self-assessment I think is real. I don't think that I'm anything special. I think I've been consistent and I can do a lot of different things.
I don't want to speak for Francis, but I certainly hope that I'm still running and able to run a marathon in 50 years' time.
Absolutely.
So you're certainly an inspiration to me. And
That's really my goal is I want to, when I'm long gone, you guys, when you're my age, are still moving and running and saying, I remember that old guy, Mike, that we interviewed, and I want to be sustainable like him. Because what do you have to look forward to when you're retiring? When you're retired, there's not a whole lot to do but coach and exercise. What if I didn't have exercise? What would I be doing? Eating? I don't know. I have to find something, right?
well, it's such a gift to be able to move our bodies like this now. And like I said, it's just a huge inspiration. I hope that I'm able to keep running distances and keep being a part of the community around the sport too for a very long time.
That's great. I love it, guys.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I know I've learned a lot. I know Brian's learned a lot, and we hope that you continue to run, and we'll look forward to seeing you at maybe the next Boston Marathon, if not sooner. Fingers crossed. Maybe our paths will cross again, and maybe we could book you for that shakeout run for Boston next year.
That sounds good, guys. Thank you so much.
Have a good one. Thank you for listening to the Zone 2 podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram at the Zone 2 podcast. New episodes drop every Wednesday.